Alive. We are live. I'm getting us up. Okay, we're gonna start out. Senator Ron Hinsdale is not here yet, but Senator Bongartz, Senator Beck had a proposal for us yesterday. Since that is ed policy, we sent him down to you, even though we have the possession. Just wondering what your committee's decision was, if any.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having that happen. Thanks to Senator Beck for coming in. I think the committee is very respectful of the depth of the work that was into this proposal and the thoughtfulness. And in some ways, I know it's not completely considered that, but the depth and thought and work that went into this. But the committee is not anywhere because we had no ability to take testimony as the meeting change, and I got my own concerns about it. We don't want to get into that, but the committee, with one hand, it kind of went, yeah, I think we should do this one, and nobody else was ready to commit. Like a long shot, and a couple of some of the ones, and so that's all I mean. We didn't quite do a totally strong. I think that's an accurate question. Does that sound accurate to you, Senator?
I mean, three people were not ready to move forward, and three people were open to moving forward. Yeah, I mean, that what I'd say about.
All right. Yes. The proposal here is that we attach your education section to the bill as it came to us, as it's come to us. It has just the House proposal on it. And that if we don't do something, there will be nothing to discuss in committee conference because there's no difference. My understanding is that your committee was pretty much in agreement. The disagreement was over at the end if something should become mandatory or remain optional.
That was certainly that was the major dividing line in the committee. But I also want to be clear that there was some people who didn't like the seesaws or the way they were set up, and there were some other. But so it was. The committee clearly split 3-3 on that. The framework that I got in front of you.
Okay.
But a lot of what we think, I think the map sort of, since I think we're doing clear by the time it came out, and a lot of it, but I want to be careful that there were some, at least one particular member who really wanted to totally redo the notion of seesaws and how they would work.
Okay.
So it was
But
all over the place.
the majority of your committee was in agreement. I have constituents, so I have some questions about some of the boundaries. But if that goes in, it then will A, get education people on the committee conference, and B, leave it open for discussion within the committee so that we can.
If what goes in, what do you mean?
These education committees draft their whole education.
Oh, we're not talking about Senator Beck's
No.
proposal.
Senator
Okay.
Beck, they're not
We're gonna
ready
put that
to
in.
go forward.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure we have something other than the House position in there
Mhm.
so that we can negotiate in conference.
Yep.
So I am hoping
Would you
that,
like a motion, Madam Chair?
well, I want to
We
wait
want
till
Mark
everyone is
here.
here. Yeah. And Senator Ron Hinsdale was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago. and I don't see her. So. Do we have any questions for Senator Barnhart so he can go back to his committee?
I know you guys, I just got my question answered, but maybe we should just tell Senator Bulick before.
Okay.
That's all our sleeves.
The education committee just hasn't had time and it's not just not ready to make the change, even though there's parts in there people like. In general, you can tell me if I'm not correct, they are agreed on the general framework. There's some concern by some people over some of the districts and details.
I don't think on that, I don't think there was,
Okay,
water commission.
but maybe some of the definitions or the seesaws.
Yes, you saw stuff. It's the main divider in the committee is whether there's an element of forced merger at the end. And
Yeah.
That was the main dividing the committee. But there were, I'm just saying, I just want to be careful about not misrepresenting.
Right.
That the committee was otherwise in both because that wouldn't be accurate.
I think this committee understands
The
not-
reality. Okay.
the reality of agreements or not agreements and something that's complex.
I had the same question.
Okay. So my goal is to get something on there, given that we don't have time to start on day one and redo it so that when we go to committee, we can then discuss and
You know what, I would, maybe what you could do is just take our version that came here yesterday and substitute that as your starting point.
that's what that was the proposal. And then we listened to Senator Beck's proposal, said that was really your domain and asked for your opinion on that before we took action. Okay, committee, any questions for Senator Bongard?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're gonna start from what you brought us over here as our committee amendment and build on it with other
and
comments.
build on it. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, do you need a motion?
I would love a motion.
I move, and I don't know the draft number is John.
We have
I
something.
think it's 6.2.
6.2 of an amendment to H 955 as finalized by the Senate Committee on Education.
It was not finalized.
Well, it was never voted on, but it was finalized, maybe. I don't know.
All right,
As
it's the
worked on?
text. Yeah, it is the text as was presented yesterday.
Correct.
And we did have a full version of that.
Which is not our committee amendment. This is us voting to start from here to incorporate it.
Right, this is, our
Correct.
committee will now proceed with our area of jurisdiction. Let's see if I've got it. Number 33.
It was 6 points.
I know she gave it to us.
Yeah, that's the version that Beth went over yesterday.
Yes.
Here is 6.2.
Okay.
All right.
Clear as to what the amendment is number wise. So we can get it on the record.
It's 6.2.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, is there further discussion? No, I'm voting, Keisha. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, have you got your sheet? Will we get a sheet?
In the meantime, I will just say I'll put it in there, so there is a difference from what the House did. I would rather have something different added, but
Okay,
as long as there can be a conversation at least besides just what the House did.
we can have that conversation. This is our spike so that the conversation can happen.
Do we need a sheet for this?
Yeah, it's a motion to amend the bill as it came to us. By substituting 6.1.
I'm not comfortable with that motion, Madam Chair. I'm just comfortable with a starting point. So it's just a straw poll that this is part of our committee amendment and we will add to it. But I don't want this to be our committee.
No,
No,
this
it's
is not. This
but we
is,
just amend the bill.
this is an amendment to the bill as it came. Then our committee will continue to amend.
Okay.
Okay?
But
And in the end, you get to vote up or vote
This-
down.
one of those votes that we're having,
Yes, you vote up and down
Drafting
on
a
every
committee.
amendment we make plus on the final bill. This is merely to have a Senate position
Sure.
that is different from the House. That's come to us from the committee, and we can alter that as we go through. All right. We're all clear on what we're voting on. All right. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Opposed say no.
No.
Okay, I've got that as 610. Better than back in the negative. You can fill that in. Okay,
oh, I'm sorry.
okay. Now Senator Ron Kinsdale has brought us.
I'll be right back. Just
Oh,
my
Thank you so much.
33.
Attack.
Wait, what is? I'll find it. Okay, Senator Ron Kinsdale, it seems that we are, and we have not spent a large amount of time on the definitions. And Senator Ron Kinsdale continues to have concerns about the definitions in this bill and the definitions in landlord tenant and other bills. I've got counsel here, but my understanding is that regularly in law, it says per this chapter, as this chapter, and that different things can mean different but similar things depending on the chapter in the law that you're dealing with. So.
So, and Madam Chair, that's why I made a presentation, so I didn't like drive myself nuts about this. Because toward the end of this brief slide presentation, I get to the ramifications of changing the definitions here. That I think you'll have other attorneys and we're policy makers,
You
so
have
it will.
wording at the end of this?
I do, and Kirby has
Okay.
the most recent draft, and no one's had time to do anything today. Essentially what I'm going to want to talk about is long-term rental, non-primary residence dwelling unit and bona fide landlord tenant agreement. And particularly my overall ask would be that you slow down on these definitions, because even just redefining them in one area of statute will signal things to the market that affect other areas of our law and policy. Next slide, please. My district name, thank you. I want to make sure everybody's on the same page that the original notion of how to put a tax on non-primary residences was an idea that I got from our last tax commissioner. Madam Chair, you were on the committee when they wanted to do a property tax freeze on blighted properties. Some folks may remember this, and
We were encouraging it to be done.
we didn't vote for it ultimately when I was on Senate Finance, but the tax department indicated they only wanted to give this benefit to primary residences or long-term rental. And I said, oh, Commissioner, how would you do that? And he said, easy. I'd look at the landlord certificate or the homestead declaration, and we would have a really good sense, because more people are using those forms, of this not being used as a short-term rental or a non-primary residence, and they would not receive that benefit. It seemed to me, it was a light bulb, that there is a very simple and navigable way to do this with documents that we want people to be filling out for good housing and tax policy to occur. Next slide, please. And Vermont has actually, I think, what is a unique landlord tenant law framework. And we have built our entire housing framework around the idea that you are a long-term renter at 30 days. So right now in our short-term rental taxation policy, you are taxed as a room when you do under 30 days. And then we, in the past, added a short-term rental tax on top of that. That all applies for when a rental is acquired for under 30 days. This actually was an issue in Burlington and Airbnb, because at one point, Burlington was asking some of these platforms to tax longer rentals on their platform as short-term rentals, and people lost tax resources. But once you hit 30 days on whatever platform, that is considered rental income, and that individual needs to claim it as rental income. The landlord certificate and the renter rebate that applies when you file the landlord certificate are also filed for any tenant at 30 days. Tenants' rights, which is a broad area and really important to this, but that's housing policy and we care a lot about it in the housing committee. All tenants' rights kick in at 30 days. So if someone is making a true landlord-tenant agreement at 30 days, they then have a lot of rights to that tenancy that turn into eviction law over ejectment proceedings. And then any of our municipalities that have created short-term ordinances, I think Stowe debated one last night. But Burlington has one, Ripton has one, other communities are contemplating them, and they all say, we prohibit short-term rentals, which means we can only advertise stays longer than 30 days. Next slide, please. So the H955 creates a new 6-month standard that seems, in my mind, to, fly in the face of our existing laws and practices. I see it as the potential to take 2 bites at the apple. We already are taxing short-term stays under 30 days with rooms and meals plus an additional tax on top of that. Now we'd be saying you are taxed as a not as a long-term rental for the next 4 months or 4.5 months if you don't hit that 6 months. We have written in our committee, and they've come through these committees, CHIP and VHIP and other housing finance programs, and we have the Commissioner of Housing here. And many of them have a principle that if you get state money, it has to be a long-term rental. If we change the definition of long-term rental here, we destabilize those programs. We've already heard in the housing committee that banks are concerned about lending to CHIP projects if the definitions are constantly changing of what we mean by they can't be primarily second homes.
So if I rent for 30 days
Mm-hmm.
to my son, a college student,
I'm getting to family
Okay.
relationship.
well, to somebody,
Mhm.
I rent it for 30 days, and the rest of the year I only rent it on weekends. I am a long-term rental.
You would be, even under the definition you have before you, I haven't added up the number of weekends, but essentially the question is that I'm proposing is right now, we determine long-term rentals in the tax department by filing a landlord certificate. So, municipal ordinances, I get into this a little bit, but municipal ordinances generally have definitions of what is a short-term or long-term rental. They also have what is a dwelling unit. So Burlington, for example, goes back and forth all the time with people about what a dwelling unit is, because they have a fee and a registration system based on your number of dwelling units. We have talked about tenant rights, and the landlord certificate would then be incongruent with this definition. Next slide, please. Just some other areas of confusion to mention to you. The dwelling unit is, there are places in the state where they have code enforcement and they have highly regulated or thought about what a dwelling unit is, and we wouldn't want to sort of take them off the path that they've debated with multiple tenants and landlords. I really want to be clear that you can rent to a family member, and that can be a bona fide landlord-tenant relationship. Otherwise, we'd be getting into the question of, is it okay to rent to your cousin versus your uncle versus your son? There are other ways to make sure we have bona fide tenancy agreements without picking on, I guess I would say, families. And informal agreements would be jeopardized if people felt they had to comply in advance. Next slide. And I kind of wrote this like a JFO PowerPoint, so thanks JFO. Property classification, I believe, should follow the property type, and then the assessment can be different. I won't get too deep into this, but I even have concerns that there's confusion. If you looked at 2 single-family homes, the lister shouldn't be looking at one and saying that's worth more because it's being used as a second home versus this one that's not being used as a second home.
It's
So I want to make sure we're really clear about that as we move forward with any classifications, that this would be a surcharge on top of existing assessments. Next slide. Here are the risks that I want to talk about. So we have the landlord tenant law would be, people would start to say, if I need to make sure I have a bona fide landlord tenant agreement, we have to rewrite our lease. I can no longer rent to legislators for 5 months. I need to rent to legislators for 10 months, because otherwise I'll be put in a different category. We would have conflicting statutory definitions in both tax and other areas of the law. We harm municipalities' existing agreements. The housing program participation, I can't stress enough, because we wrote into CHIP that you couldn't have a large number of non-primary residences into the life of the CHIP financing, but that we would use the landlord certificate and the homestead declaration to determine that. We wrote that in the bill. Senator Matos was there on the conference committee. I think I wrote some more stuff here that may have disappeared in this version. But we're talking about some compliance burdens and some real, I would also add that when you look at families, can you go to the next slide in case it's not here? Yeah, so one thing I want to add that I had written in before, but didn't show up in this draft. I want to make sure people are clear that the federal government sets policy for family members to to provide home loans to other family members. So if you are ultra wealthy, you can pay for your child's home, or you can, fully fund a relative's home. And then you can, you have to then take interest on that payment. But I think it's about 1% lower than what the Federal Reserve Bank sets home interest rates at. So the ultra wealthy are able to finance their child's home. And it's often going to be more middle class folks who have a property, still need to make the mortgage, still need to do those things, and are collecting rent from that relative in order to do that. And you'll see that show up in my amendment with Kirby, because what I'd like to do is be more careful about the loopholes that we're trying to close rather than change all of landlord tenant law in the process. And that's sort of my last point here is I think we can solve narrow tax policy concerns without destabilizing housing law, which is the deep interest of the Housing Policy Committee, is that this will all tend to affect other housing policy. The other thing that might not.
Housing Policy Committee taking testimony.
I have begged, you can ask Senator Chittenden. The chair has said that she does not see it as her time to spend on this.
Okay, but this has been out there for several months. The
Out there.
The House proposal.
And I've been sort of waving my arms to everyone saying, I have this
It
concern.
just came to us yesterday.
The other thing I would say that is a huge housing policy consideration, especially for populated areas, is we have a strong 1 to 6 month housing market. We have traveling nurses, we have students, we have legislators in Montpelier who all rent for like 4 to 5.5 month periods. So any system that tax creates that says you have to live here for exactly 183 days, and or you have to rent for exactly 170 something days.
80.
So
Not heard of finish before.
Let's finish.
yeah, this is my last point. The medium-term housing market is a real thing that people need. And I think I would say we are trying to attack a mouse with a nuclear warhead by changing all of these policies in order to achieve this particular change. I really sympathize with the committee on trying to determine, hey, this is either a long-term rental or it's a homestead, or you're paying the second home tax. But I'd like us to work for the next year or so on not changing the definition of long-term rental without thinking about the implications of what that does in statute. So I personally can't support defining long-term rental in this bill differently than it exists everywhere else in the law.
Okay, so if
And then Kirby has the amendment.
your in this bill, as I understand it, and as you told me, says that in order to be a long-term rental, you have to be rented for at least 30
You have
days
to file a landlord certificate.
and at least 6 months of the year. So you could do 6 30-day rentals.
That's what's in your bill.
That's what's in the bill. It's that 6 months that's a concern to you.
Yeah, if you want to go back to that slide, or yeah.
Okay.
It's that is not pondered in any law or policy practice around what a long-term rental is. So this would be a definition of long-term rental that is not in
So
practice.
if we
in
just
other areas.
put in file a landlord certificate, that would make you happy.
I would be happy. I also worked on a change with Kirby to the bona fide landlord tenant agreement because I worry that that is undefined. That we don't have such thing in landlord tenant law as a bona fide landlord tenant
We
agreement.
could work on
Okay.
that. Senator Hardy.
Well, I mean, I'm curious about what her amendment shows, but the 30 days, this does not change landlord tenant law. This is tax law. And you can still have a lease for 30 days under this definition of long-term rental. You just have to have more than one lease for 30 days. You have to have it. You could have, as the chair said, 6 individual 30-day rentals. 30 days for the purpose of tax policy is not long-term. And so I don't see this as a conflict, and
In other areas of tax policy, you do say 30 days.
I'd like to get, if we're gonna make any changes in this area, I'd like to get a lot more testimony because this is not convincing to me.
And I think that you should hear more
Say this
before making a
bill
decision.
not coming out today.
Um,
This bill needs to come out.
so in other areas of tax law, we have reaffirmed in recent years that we treat short-term rentals as under 30 days and long-term rentals as over 30 days. That's tax law. And then we get into landlord tenant law from there. So I would just say it exists in all of these places, and it would really behoove the committee to understand that before redefining long-term rental where it already exists in tax policy.
You suggested at the beginning that your ask is a delay or to push this off to not necessarily have it come into effect. Is what you're about to present in the language somehow having more consideration for this is codified?
I'm looking at Kirby because I think he's been in here with you, or we've been trying to get food or something. That is a lot of what we contemplated, is that we don't have to redefine long-term rental.
The drafter just drafts what you're contemplating
Okay.
and proposing. The drafter still propose.
Okay, so what we last discussed,
We,
me and Kirby,
okay,
I haven't seen what he has in his hands because we haven't seen each other in an hour.
but it is the 60-day, not
6 months.
6 months, not the 30 days. So I guess,
It's taking out the 6 months and redefining a landlord tenant agreement so that we don't create a new definition of bona fide
you're
landlord
not
tenant agreement.
creating, there's no landlord tenant agreement in this.
Oh,
It just says, it says bona fide, but there's no
it says bona fide landlord tenant.
Yeah.
Relationship.
relationship.
And this is only for
Our-
verification from the tax department if they want to check. This is not something that would have to be filed with the tax department, is my.
No, but people tend to comply in advance with tax law if they are worried about a concern being raised. So this would disrupt existing landlord tenant agreement.
Okay. I think we've got that and we can start working on it. Committee, we have not really gotten into the definitions. I haven't seen a flashcard yet. There are other questions, so I think if we have Kirby go over what's in the bill, then we know what we're comparing the proposal to, and then we can look at the proposal to change what's in the bill. So I think that might be the best road to follow. And Kirby, can you do that? And then we can move forward from there.
Kirby Pete, legislative council. So I do have some draft language of the markup information that we talked about last Thursday, but what I'm hearing is that you would like to pull up what is in the bill in its current state
Let's-
and walk through the definitions
Yep.
and what they all mean.
And then we set that, and then we can go back through what I think we've agreed on. So we remember what we agreed on. But. Yes,
Senator Chin, can I steal the screen from you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
okay, so. I think most of us have this. Yeah, this bill. So what page are you starting on?
I pulled up the version I was looking at, which is 5.2. So it's not for the education part, it's not going to be the same, but for our purposes, it's the same.
Okay, so
I can grab the that's
I'm just.
better for you.
I just sent you the link.
Section
Well, this-
58. All right.
We'll use 6.2.
Oh, no, but that one, the pages are off.
Oh, you're looking at 5.2 also?
I'm looking at as top of the house, because we haven't changed this yet, unless do you have a draft with the changes we asked for yet?
It's 6.2 public. Let's just do as passed by the House because there's nothing's been changed and
Nothing has been changed in this one. So section 58, I think. Page 100.
one moment while I pull that up.
98, yeah, we took on a lot in the 90s at the request of the tax department. Okay, yes, property tax classification.
So we are looking at the as passed by the House version of H 955, which is the same place that you'd be starting from when it comes to RADs and tax classifications. Section 30 is RADs and section,
Section 58 is property tax classifications, is that where you're, yeah.
let's not forget section 57, which is a crucial part. The grand list change, but it's not a little joke.
Okay,
So section 58 is would be the where you find the proposed new statute
there's the,
controlling tax classifications. And subsection C, starting on page 99.
Yeah.
Is your definitions, which I think is where a lot of the discussion is centering around.
yeah, I think it is.
So as a reminder, this system is based off of whether a property has dwelling units, how many dwelling units it has, and how those dwelling units are used. It is also drafted in a way so that anything that's considered a homestead under current law stays exactly as it is. In many cases, homesteads that have a business purpose under current law would be treated the same, except for short-term rentals, or if there's part of it that's used, or if there's a separate dwelling unit that's used as a second home, that would change. So that's the beginning point. So because a lot of this is built off of dwelling units, and it's built off of the concept of parcels and what's going on a parcel.
So the snowbirds that rent to legislators
Yes.
or other people
Mhm.
for 3 to 4 months. So that is a long-term rental, but it is their homestead. They have presently, I understand, requirements under the law, which they may or may not know and may or may not comply with. But this would not change anything for them. it would still be their homestead
It would be their
with a
homestead.
long-term rental.
Under current law in that scenario, the property owner would file their homestead declaration. They're required to, because you said that they live there more than half the year. If they have a separate dwelling unit that they use for short-term rentals, which is is that what I'm hearing? Is that the,
No, they
Oh.
go south and they rent their house.
their whole house for 3 or 4 months?
Yeah.
Okay. In that scenario, they are supposed to put on under current law, supposed to put on their homestead declaration that there's a part of the time of the year the entire house is rented out. And that's supposed to be factored in as a business purpose, and it would mean that a portion of the value is taxed as non-home or as non-homestead
Right.
under current law. And there's a provision of law that's very clear about that.
Nothing changes here.
But nonetheless, it would be their homestead. Under this new structure, still their homestead. But the portion that is rented out a part of the year would not meet the definition of a long-term rental, so it would be classified for a portion of the value as non-homestead residential, as the higher
Okay.
rate.
And that's because of the 6 months.
Because it doesn't
It is longer
meet
than
6
30
months.
days,
Yes,
but it is for 5 months of the year. Or
yes.
4, because they have to be here 6 months plus to be a homestead. Okay,
We could fix that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
that right now, we're
Depends
just,
on what you mean by fix.
I got a solution.
okay. Fix is maybe a pejorative term. Ah.
Chittenden's suggestion would address that situation, and his suggestion would make it so that it's the same treatment under current law as in both instances. There would never be the higher rate, it would be the non-homestead.
And then they would
Non-resident.
file it as an income property. It would be a long-term income.
And to be clear, they still pay any short-term rental taxes.
Yes.
If they had Airbnb, whatever we charge for those things, if they did those.
Well, we don't
Just
know.
get the second home tax.
So they don't pay those right now because they're not an Airbnb. They're just renting to a tenant for 4 months of the year, not through some kind of service, right?
If it's a homestead.
It has nothing to
That's
do
it.
with service.
Senator Hardy makes a nuanced point, it's true. When it comes to meals tax, if that's what you're talking about,
You have to serve me.
or rooms tax, I mean, it's meals and rooms tax. When it comes to rooms tax, if you're on a platform, that platform, the way it's set up, will collect rooms tax automatically. You don't have a choice. But if you're doing it outside those platforms, it's up to the property owner to do that, and they may not.
But once you get past 30 days, you don't own rooms and meals.
It depends on the length of each stay. But
Oh,
yes,
no,
that's
I
part
mean,
of the room
it's
tax.
just by tax law, what the.
If it's one stay that's 4 months, also a good nuance will be, if it's a stay that's 4 whole months, then rooms tax won't apply anymore because it's beyond the 30 days.
Right.
The way the rooms tax works is, if a stay is more than 30 days, one singular stay is more than 30 days, then it's considered under the rooms tax as being a long-term stay, and rooms tax doesn't apply. It's
And
also
or only to the first 30 days.
all of it.
That's what I thought.
There's not.
There's also a component of that if your total short-term rentals across the year don't exceed 14 days, then there's no rooms tax required there either. Just, that's another.
Okay,
But in that legislator's example, that has a homestead because they live there 6 months plus a year, if they list it on a platform for a short-term rental via Airbnb for more than 14 days, they will pay those short-term rental taxes on that homestead parcel. Is that correct?
If you put it on a platform, the platforms will collect it.
So yeah.
I don't know the platforms well enough to know that if they're programmed in a way to know that if a stay exceeds 30 days at one time, to not collect. I don't know if they programmed them.
My point is, if we exempted that declared homestead from just the second home tax contemplated here, they would still be treated through the current tax treatment of that part of the property that's rented out for that time with the business use. And if they rented it on Airbnb, they would still pay the Airbnb short-term rental
Right, but
tax.
Airbnb is their choice.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with us or tax policy. That is an individual business decision.
Agreed.
If they put it in the newspaper, tax may or may not catch them renting it and tell them they have to charge it. Okay,
So, but should there not be a rule that is applicable universally to every building of a certain type? And that should be clear in terms
Yeah.
of what our law reads.
and that's what we need to make clear. If we go with just the 30 days, then nothing changes in present law in the definition of long-term rental. If we say a long-term rental is a minimum of 30 days and has a landlord tenant certificate, which landlords don't always fill out, but maybe this will do them, then they are not a short-term rental. I'm wondering what, but we're going to conference, so we can do this, is what problem the other body was trying to fix by saying that's 6 months.
So the period, the rental period that you require is a policy decision.
Yes,
And there's things, if you have concerns. So I mean, I would leave it at that. That is just purely a decision with, at what point do you think that property owners should not have to pay the highest rate anymore for your own policy motivations? My understanding has been, the goal has been that second homes and short-term rentals have been deemed policy-wise as not the best use of the housing stock, and you want to deter those.
that's just
So it's your policy choice that how long of the stay is long enough to meet your policy goals. Is 30 days enough? And there's also the extra consideration, what was seen when the transfer tax rate was changed. So there's a higher rate for transfers that were going to be used as a second home. And that used the landlord certificate. And we know that we made a technical change this year to allow the department to look into those, because it was pretty easy for people to work around the landlord certificates being a requirement. So
okay,
so part of your policy decision is how much are you concerned about how easy it would be to work around a 30-day requirement?
yeah, I think having spent several pass-throughs in economic development, that was one of the major concerns is, and not necessarily with your back bedroom that you rented out during foliage, but with units that were suitable for full-time occupancy as dwelling units. Kitchen, probably more than a microwave, and sanitation facilities, bedrooms, whatever. Hand in glove with this though, and what's happening down the hall, and we don't know, because when I started getting emails, I contacted everyone who told me they had a house or an apartment that they had chosen to go to short-term rental on, and I said, why? And I got back because it takes too long and it's too expensive to get rid of bad tenants. So there's a balance that's gonna happen here. But this tax law is meant, I thought, to discourage people from just making that change and taking an apartment that would be suitable to house, put a household in full time, and doing it part-time.
Madam Chair, may I?
No, okay, I don't take questions from the thing. This is a committee discussion. So Senator Hardy.
I am certainly open to looking at language, but for tax purposes, 30 days is not long-term in my book. That would just allow people to rent their home for 30 days and get a lower tax rate instead of doing long-term rentals. And we can come up with all sorts of little scenarios about it, which I think is not the way to make policy. I mean, I think if our policy as you know, Kirby laid out, like we have to think about what our policy goals are and how we're meeting the policy goals are. And one of the policy goals is to raise revenue for the education fund, in order to lower property taxes for other people who are legitimate primary residences in their homesteads. And a 30-day rental period is not long-term. And in the, you know, I don't care what else is said, it is not long-term when it comes to taxation. And if we take out little I, the little one that has the 6-month limit on it, we're just opening it up to lots of people getting around this policy. And I don't think that is a good idea.
But none of this takes effect unless the foundation goes into effect, right? So, I mean,
Right,
Yes.
at this point.
Can I say something? I would generally agree that I see this as a potentially huge loophole. So I share your concern that if we just had a 30 days and somebody that wants to avoid the second home tax can walk right through that and get around it. So I do see validity in really considering how that 6-month thing might impact policy, but I do share your concern that that's too low of a threshold. And I just want to, I like to structure our discussions because sometimes they can meander. Maybe we're talking about 2 things here. One is the 6 months, and happy to flesh that out. I'd love to see the language that Keisha Senator Ron Hinsdale was working with Kirby. The second piece that I'd love to come back to, because I think it's important, is I don't think homesteads declared in Vermont should pay a second home tax. They will still pay business tax under current treatment for that part of the house that's used. They will still pay their short-term rental taxes. But if you're a declared homestead, a Vermonter living here, staying here, declaring income, and you do go to Florida for 2 months out of the year and you get some little bit of money, I don't think that's a second home. I think that's a primary.
It's not.
So I propose part of that, one little line should just exempt homesteads from the second home tax. They still pay all the other taxes.
All, the homesteads don't. If you live
They
in,
do with the current.
no, if you have a second building in your backyard and you rent it out, you don't live in it. It is not a homestead. If it is not a homestead. If you,
But I mean, to
we
conflate
have
that,
all
sorry, to structure
kinds of
the conversation.
buildings now in which landlords live in an apartment in half of a duplex or a half of a quadruplex. And the rest of the building is full-time. That's,
But, Madam Chair, even in that circumstance, so I was talking about the legislator example where you live 6 months somewhere else and then you rent it out. But even
Kirby
in
just
your,
said that doesn't change it.
So
Technically-
to clarify.
But
I
if the
can help.
6 months changes it.
Under the classification system, there would be scenarios where some uses on a homestead parcel would incur the higher rate, the second home. And I think what Senator Chittenden's trying to propose is, you know, under current law, those uses would be subject to the non-homestead rate. And I think that he's trying to argue, hopefully I don't sound, I'm not trying to establish anything, but just for clarity, he's trying to retain that non-homestead treatment, is my understanding,
Right.
and not have the second home rate though in those cases.
and I would just elaborate one more piece.
For what happens on a homestead parcel.
In this scenario, you also raised similarly. if in my district, there are lots of people that do an ADU and they do an ADU that on their homestead and they are just trying to pay the property taxes. And I would just say if they live in that building and declare it as a homestead and they've got an ADU, they're still going to pay the short-term rental taxes to Airbnb. They're still going to pay their
So I don't have
residential
a
taxes.
lot of sympathy for people
Their-
that have
their
the
business
money to
tax.
build an ADU. I'm more concerned about the widow that rents out the back
We have
bedroom.
people overhoused and they've got too large of a house, so this is a good use of our roofing, so, okay, but again, if I don't, the committee doesn't like the amendment, but I'm just proposing that homesteads should not get hit with a second home tax, that's what I would put on the table.
So can I ask a clarifying question on Kirby and then? So a home to declare something your homestead, it has to be that you live there more than 6 months, yes? Is that
Yes.
true under current law?
There's
Is that-
pay
just
taxes
a few
in
ways. You can be domiciled in Vermont, which has its own long legal meaning. Or it could be 183 days. And meet it that way. Which
Okay.
is what the 1 day over half the year.
That's under current law
That's current.
and that stays the same.
And you're required to
under-
file a homestead if that's the case.
Correct. And that would stay the same under the proposed
Yes.
H nine
You're also
fifty-five.
required to pay
So,
other tax statements like income tax. If you live here for 183 days and spend the rest of the year in Florida,
right.
you're
You have to
retired,
split
you,
between.
no,
okay.
Florida doesn't have an income tax. So you have to file income tax with Vermont. If you come here and you rent for less than 183 days, if I come here and I rent for 3 weeks to go skiing, unless I'm actively earning money while I'm skiing, I don't. It's your homestead determines where you basically, whose tax
Yeah.
jurisdiction you fall under.
Okay,
If I'm just here, I don't.
yeah, I wanna try to figure out, okay, so if your homestead is here and you're paying the homestead rate, you live here more than 6 months or 183 days, you file the form, all that. And you rent out your house for 4 months when you're gone in Florida or wherever. Those 4 months, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. Those 4 months, you, even if you've declared a homestead under current law, you should be, if you're following the law,
Mhm.
reporting that 4 months you have income on your home
Mhm.
and you would be paying
The
a third of your year would be the non-homestead rate.
Mhm.
Right.
And I think I would defer to Jake on the exact calculation of how that's done administratively, but yes, that's.
Okay,
how-
so you're already paying a different tax rate. And in some communities, depending on where you live, the non-homestead is higher and in some
It's possible
it's
that
lower.
Yeah. it's
under our current
Yeah.
system, it's possible that it could decrease
It could be lower.
issue taxes.
So either way, it's a different rate. And so
Here.
under this bill, as it came to us, it's the same situation. It's a different rate. It's just the question of, is it the non-homestead, non-residential or non-homestead residential?
There is another wrinkle with the classifications, which hasn't come up lately, but I should mention it. There's a provision in here that is not in current law that for mixed uses,
Mhm.
that the primary use, when a floor space is used for two different uses,
Mhm.
that the primary use, however it's used the most often, is the one that should count. Now, that does conflict somewhat with the homestead definition.
Mm.
And that's not something that at this point we completely
We haven't
cleared out.
reconciled it.
We haven't really reconciled it, so, but I flag it to say that it's possible that if you make no changes and we go with this, that the long-term interpretation would be because of that provision that I just was talking about, that it actually would change from being completely homestead under the new system as opposed to being a portion of it being non-homestead.
You're right, so that it actually might mean the default is homestead.
Yes,
Because
so we have a little bit of
most
a
of the-
conflict and
Yeah.
something we're aware of.
Everything at some point, and then we can figure it out, because that one is news to me. And then we could sit down and it might help to just do a current law, House and Senate, start doing a side by side at some point. Chris, you have a,
Yeah, I was just trying to wrap my head around the whole entire conversation. So what Senator Chitten's proposal is for that 4 months that you are renting it out. It's not a short term, it's over 30 days. You don't want that to fall into the second homes tax.
Correct.
And
Because it's a homestead.
because it's a homestead.
Yeah.
And then as it pertains to short-term rentals,
There
when
too,
you say about the ADU and if it's on Airbnb, that would that portion of the homestead be outside of this, or would it be encapsulated by what your amendment?
so if that ADU was still on the homestead, if you could just jump to that definition, then they would still pay the non-homestead tax rate, the current treatment. of the
like
tax structure.
an apartment building.
Correct. If it's
Non-homestead
owner occupied parcel that's declared as a
commercial.
homestead.
Okay.
Even if it's
So-
a building that, I'm sorry, Chris.
No, I was gonna say, so if it was an ADU that was on the property, it would still not be treated as a second home, even if it was a short-term rental in that aspect.
Every weekend.
And local municipalities would be able to regulate STRs based on
And to
whatever.
be clear, some cities in Burlington have a special exception for short-term rentals, that if it's owner occupied, you're allowed to do that.
But, but an
Yeah.
ADU, if it's
to pay
not,
the taxes.
if it's, that's not owner occupied, if it's not, if it's a
Right,
separate
it's a separate
building,
building.
that's a
It's attached.
separate building.
If it's attached as an ADU
Oh,
of the
that's
owner occupied parcel, it is allowed.
Yeah, but-
They're not usually attached.
So,
Just accessory dwelling.
so here's a visual.
A lot of them are
If it's on
not.
the parcel, it's declared as a homestead.
Here's a visual to try to clear this up, because it's not too complicated. So Senator Chitten's proposing that in this definition for a non-homestead residential, currently that says. So the definition is, it means a parcel or portion of a parcel with a dwelling unit, that's the key, that's dwelling unit.
Yeah.
And that is not in the current version of the language, which says homestead right here. This would change it to part of a homestead or on the same parcel as a homestead. Which means that any dwelling units that's used for some other purpose other than homestead would never be put into the non-homestead residential. So logically, it instead gets put into non-homestead, non-residential.
They still pay taxes.
But
That's their
the,
treatment.
but B on there said rented out as a long-term rental. So does that part of a homestead that is rented, are those two criteria? Because if I rent it out long-term, then I'm providing housing for a household. And that's meeting the state goal, and I'm making money to pay my taxes. If I'm renting it out every weekend for people to go to UVM ball games in their new field house, that is not a long-term rental. It is using a building that could be long-term and using it as short. That is a different situation.
But if it's their declared homestead, they're still gonna pay taxes on the revenue, they're gonna pay the short-term rental taxes, and they're gonna pay the business use taxes. I'm just saying, let's not charge that homestead an additional second home tax. That's
We
what
are
I'm-
charging it on the portion that has the short-term rental property. The state, in many instances, has provided grants to build ADUs, lots of grants.
So-
So we have subsidized that property with the goal of providing dwelling units for households.
I'm not proposing to exempt them from taxes. I'm
No,
proposing
but
to not
now
tax it this third way.
They are not meeting that goal of providing dwelling units for households. They are using it, and I would say we have to look at landlord tenant because it's too hard to get rid of households that set fires.
Do those grants prevent short-term rentals when you get the money from the state for an ADU?
I don't think they prevent it.
Yes, they do.
They do.
They are,
Prevents
the
it.
BHF
That's what I
bylaw requires you not.
So it says you have
30
to use it as a long-term rental or a primary residence for somebody.
For how long? Ever?
I think it.
I don't think.
That was to get the forgivable loan
Okay, so once you pay the forgivable loan off,
Yeah, then you don't have to.
That's my argument. Those ADUs are just Vermonters trying to pay their property.
Can I ask you a question?
They're tired of being bad.
So I hear you, but I think that part of it is that it would be proportional, so you would still like the proportion of the house that you're living in, it would still be the residential homestead rate. It's just the proportion that is not, would be at the different rate, either at a long-term rental rate, which is the non-homestead, non-residential, or at the non-homestead residential if it's a short-term rental,
I'm proposing
So-
that continue to be treated as the non-homestead.
non-residential.
even
You're
if
just-
it's short.
Okay, so I I'm open to that if it's in the same unit. What my concern is that the chair mentioned is that there are short-term rentals or there are ADUs that are totally separate buildings and they are housed, and especially in rural areas in my district, there are ADUs that are like down a long driveway from, they're not even next to, I mean, they're literally down a long driveway and they're considered ADUs. And that's how they've been
And they're
treated.
rented out for a lot. of
and
money.
they can be rented out for, they're like little homes, they're not, they're, and so if it's a separate unit, completely, a separate building, I think that's not.
There's always gonna be edge cases.
Okay,
Well,
why don't we,
to the-
just so we know what we're talking about, walk through the bill and flag areas. We know we have an issue with that 60-day because we do
You mean 30 day?
30-day, no, the
Month?
60
months.
days, so it's 6 months.
30 days.
You have, the 30 days, I think. Is the differentiate between short-term and long-term in other laws. It's 30 days. Before it's but this for tax policy. That's where we're going and saying, and it has to be, even if that tenant doesn't last 6 months. It has to be available for long-term rental, available for more than 30 days, for at least 6 months, half the year, for 6 months. There are already, whether it's abided by or not, if you rent out your apartment or your home for 3 to 5 months, or you do a home swap, you go to Florida and they come to ski. That does not. You know, you're supposed to declare that, but it's as business and pay the tax. I don't know who knows that or if they do. It's the short-term rentals have to be done for 6 months of the year. So I come here to go skiing. I ski, I make it available, or. Yeah, the other thing that Senator Chittenden might change is we have a fair number of landlords now who live in, as I said, a duplex, quadruplex. I don't, right now, if they go to short-term rentals in there and stop dealing with nasty long-term tenants, they are paying the business tax. I don't know if there's no penalty for them, that we want to make it easier for them to convert from a long-term rental into a short-term rental.
I just think owner occupied parcels are different because they.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
We can go round and round and round on this all day. Are we trying to get to consensus? What is our plan? I'm happy to go through the language, but I think we have some philosophical differences that I don't think are gonna be worked out.
Probably not. Let's go through the bill, then we know what we're
I-
talking about.
Can I also just make a point first before, that there's a difference between a parcel and a dwelling unit.
Sure.
And I think that what if you're just talking about a home that is one home that maybe they're renting out part of a room in or renting out for 4 months to, you know, legislators or people or whatever, that's still one dwelling unit that we're talking about, but a ADU or something in it that might be on the same parcel, but is a different dwelling
It is
unit.
still
And so there's
treated, it
a
is treated
there's a
differently
difference
now.
in dwelling units
Not
too
attached.
in here. So I think we have to be really careful to understand parcels and dwelling units
And attached
matter,
and detached.
and that's.
So I'm happy to just do a straw poll
Okay.
vote, because.
No, let's go through it. I'm not doing a straw poll till we know what we're talking
And I'm
about.
okay if I lose the vote. I'm just saying, I think we should treat
Let's go
declared
through
homesteads.
the
That's
bill,
not
so we know what we're talking about before we do a straw poll.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's based on emotion, not brain power. So
Here's
let's,
quick copy, so I'll be back.
let's walk through the bill and see what it says. And then how that changes from current law. And then we can go back with the pros and cons. That 6 months is already, I've got it flagged as an issue. So I think
So, okay,
we can go from there.
to so we were talking about the definitions before. And to clarify some things, which I think you probably understand, but, for the sake of some due diligence. Throughout Vermont statutes, as used in this section or as used in this chapter is always used when there's definitions. And that does have a legal meaning, so that everyone's clear. These definitions do not have the same legal meaning if used for the law somewhere else. Same thing is true for law that's other places. That's one point I would make. Another point I would make is that, the way that the entire system of laws works is within each chapter, section, area of law, there's different goals that are trying to be achieved, and it's normal for there to be different definitions of the same words. But and it's a big reason why, as used in this section, is the way that we go about it, because that's just going to happen. And when it comes to time periods for things, that's also context based on the chapter and the area of law you're talking about. 30 days is a time period that's used for things that's relevant for landlord tenant law, as you talked about. It's relevant for meals tax when it comes to, the point at which, or rooms tax rather, at the point at which, rooms tax no longer applies. But that 30-day period is for a specific reason within the context of the, and is not meant to affect other 30-day periods or have anything to do with it. Likewise, we have a 6-month period here in classifications that's being discussed as the policy choice was made that 6 months is the period at which you think that tax treatment should change because the law believes that is a legitimate long-term rental. That does not line up with all concepts related to leases and things, but it does line up with some. It lines up with the homestead declaration being the 183 days, which is essentially a 6-month period. It lines up with being able to claim a renter credit, which it also requires to be a renter for 6 months. So there's, I don't want everyone to get lost in that stuff. So hopefully we all understand that the limitations for some of these things and how some of these things are not a problem. Okay.
Can we agree as a committee? One of the reasons we're paying any attention to short-term rentals, second homes, is because there is a thought or a feeling that those are homes that are not available to full-time residents for occupancy, and that we, in many, if not every area of this state, have a housing shortage.
Yes, with an additional statement. I don't like the commercialization of residential areas, so homes that are just bought up by investors, flipping them and then renting them as short-term rentals. just to this conversation, though, I'm not against ADUs better utilizing houses on owner occupied parcels. I think
That's,
good use.
that's beyond the question I just asked. I'm asking the committee, can we agree that one of the reasons we're doing this increased tax, people who are not full-time residents, meaning they have residence here for 6 months or more, are not in general subject to Vermont income tax. So they're not paying that tax. And that they are, in many instances, using for short-term dwellings that could be used to house people in the long term and help ease the housing shortage. That's my understanding from housing policy about why we have been concerned with short-term rentals.
I'll just say, I think second homeowners do have a place in our economy here in the state,
Yeah.
just because they have a lot less strain on our services that we provide, and they actually offer a lot of economic growth for the state by utilizing contractors to maintain those properties. I think a simpler way to solve this whole situation we're in right now is if we just kept those tax classifications as they are now, because I don't think we should move towards that second home tax. Because I think there is a balance where you can have folks that have these second homes that may offer them as short-term rentals as a solution. We want tourism here in the state. We want people to visit. And all of the programs, CHIP, that we're doing to increase housing for folks that are here full-time, I think are good ways of getting those units online. That's just my thought. I think there's a world of Vermont that we can all coexist.
And I think we have to concede on the other side that we are highly dependent on visitor visits in our economy, and that we do need housing for visitors. That I think we're striking for a balance. If we don't, and there is a difference, there's short-term rentals and there's second homes that are second homes. They are not housing. They're housing one visiting family, the owners, and they sit vacant the rest of the year. There are others. The balance is, at what point do we have to start building more motels, which we all know we love, to house the visitors? So I think that's the line we continually walk. And we're trying to find a middle ground to, I think, discourage people. Or just, yeah.
I think we've done stuff by increasing the property transfer tax quite substantially to help defer that, and now by increasing the property taxes quite substantially. I mean, you could be setting up a road where you don't have second homeowners in Vermont, and the strain could increase on the services that we provide.
Do we want young families to come to Vermont or not? Do we want-
Absolutely.
Okay.
I believe there was a statement made on the floor the other day that we have about 5,000 children born every year, and 13,000 tip over the scale into
But we
65
can't have
plus.
it
So,
both ways, guys. We can't be saying we need more young families, bring more people into Vermont. And oh, by the way, there are no houses for you.
well, we can create housing of all different sorts. So, like in my
Well,
area,
they say.
if
Where
you
are
have a
they?
senior living facility, a 55 plus neighborhood, they go in a day's time because folks are overhoused. They don't want to move into an assisted facility living space.
We keep talking about
And-
building more houses.
Okay, let's walk
You could make
through
it one.
the bill.
I think also there are some communities where the rate of second homes are over 50%. And those communities don't have affordable housing for Vermonters who are year-round residents. I don't think anybody at this table is saying we don't want to have, second home owners be part of our communities or be, investing and living in Vermont. All of us have friends and constituents and neighbors who fit into that category and or customers or whomever. But we have a high rate of second home ownership in many of our communities. It's making it hard for people to find housing. It's making it hard for people who live here year round to afford to be here. And I think that a second home tax, broadly defined, is very popular with Vermonters who live here year round. They want to see this because they want to be able to reduce their own taxes and say, look, these people can afford a second home. Not everybody can afford a first home, let alone a second home. So we moving in the direction of having a tax policy that differentiates between primary residents and year-round residents and second homes that are largely available to people with the means to afford a second home, I think is an important tax policy. And obviously we're going to argue over the details of it, but I think that it's naive to think that second homes are not an issue in many of the communities in Vermont, and that it's naive to think that many Vermonters don't want to see a second. I think many do want to.
Okay, we are going to walk through the bill so we know what we're talking about. And then we can discuss what, if anything, we want to either do away with or
We've meandered a bit, but I definitely want to see Senator Rom's proposed language.
we will
Topic.
see Senator Roms. I do not take up anyone's, and I get a little resentful and find
No,
that I would.
my bad.
Okay, let's walk through this. Then we know what we're amending.
Okay.
Okay,
So, we're talking about the definitions. And the first important one is dwelling unit. As I was saying before, the system is based off of looking at what's going on a parcel and how many dwelling units are there. So that you're all aware, the definition of dwelling unit that you have here is it's a building or part of a building, including a and then many different types of buildings, or other similar property or structure containing a separate means of ingress and egress. So one of the more important.
This is what I'm
here-
mentioning.
And this is what I think Senator Hardy was talking about in the case of a homestead that has maybe any kind of either long-term or short-term rental unit inside of it, where they share an entrance and an exit with the homestead itself. Under our definition would always put that unit as not a separate dwelling unit. It would be one dwelling unit, homestead. And then it would have some business purpose that should be claimed on the homestead declaration, but it would not ever put it into the short-term rental and second home category, because being in that category requires being a dwelling unit.
okay, would it be similar to a home office?
It would be just like a home office.
Okay, so.
That
Makes
is,
sense. I see.
you,
Yep.
this is, okay,
We
thank you.
have a home office, business, and there are real,
And so for everyone's clarity, what Senator Chittenden was proposing would be to take the treatment we were just talking about for when there's one entrance and exit and apply it to, it doesn't matter if there's a separate entrance or exit.
right, it's a separate house, a quarter
A
of a mile.
separate house would get
like-
that same treatment under the language proposed.
Well, let's go through this because
Okay.
then you get to a house in X number of acres. And
So there's more to a dwelling unit. First, I just wanted to flag the separate means of ingress and egress. That's a component of it. Another is designed or intended to be used for occupancy by one or more persons in a household, including providing, so these are requirements, providing living facilities for sleeping, cooking, and sanitary needs. So something that is missing a bathroom would not be considered a dwelling unit and would never be put into the higher rate, because again, the higher rate is dependent on dwelling units and how they're used. And then also is fit for year-round habitation as determined by the commissioner. So this is the part where a seasonal camp would never be treated as a second home or short-term.
and there are going to be some Vermonters who are unhappy about having their camp some of them will fall into that
And so their camp,
definition.
if their camp is not used as their homestead, it would be just like current law and be non-homestead, non-residential.
Right.
And when I say just like current law, I should flag, that's assuming that you keep the tax rates the same. I mean, if you,
Yeah.
if you do something to change the tax rates to
Right.
non-homestead, non-residential, it no longer is just like current law.
But they are different. Well, in theory, they are different now. They're set differently
Yes.
for commercial and homestead.
So, okay, so there's dwelling unit and the way that it's used, dwelling unit comes into play mostly when, or it comes in entirely into play when there's a dwelling unit that's not a homestead, it ends up being classified as non-homestead residential in most cases. That's the key part of the dwelling.
So I just want to be clear on just up a little bit about year-round habitation. So if you have a family camp that's insulated, has running water, sewer, bathroom, meets all those criteria. And it is a camp that you go to up in the woods, whatever, that would still fall under second homes tax because you use it year-round. It can be used year-round habitation.
It sounds like what you're describing, it's that would be like any normal house, right? Because it's, yeah.
You
But if
could
it's
rent
a-
that.
Second home.
I'm just saying, there's definitely camps out there that are
Hmm.
that way.
There are some nice camps.
And-
I wonder if it accessible by public road. I've sold some camps, some of them might be very nice, but you had to have a four-wheel drive plus to even get to them.
So details like that are something that the department will have to work out.
Okay.
This is not perfectly defined as it is. And,
Which is why it's taking us another year to,
and so presumably the department will have to issue some guidance. I don't know if they'll choose to do rules, but there'll have to be some guidance around this and they'll have to interpret it and access, if access is cut off for half the year or something. Could very well be, could be something they take into account or not. I don't know.
I mean, there are trails out there now
Mhm.
with property on them.
My,
Never found it.
my sister visited from Tennessee and followed Google Maps and found one of those for like 2 hours when she could have taken the interstate 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's true.
At least
I
you get
pulled
stuck in
on,
the
I pulled
knot.
on to a major dirt highway and my thing started screaming, "You're off the traveled way, turn around." I'm saying I'm on a major dirt road.
My sister thought that's what Vermont was like. She thought it was normal. Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway. So she's like driving on the road.
So anyway,
So-
yes, there are dirt roads and there are dirt roads, but they are class 3 and class 4 and generally.
Yeah.
Class 4 is not accessible. During winter months.
So moving on, we have the definition of homestead, it has the same meaning as current law. And that's consistent throughout. There was an effort here to make sure, I've been said this many times, but the homestead sections and the classification sections all partner together. Then we get to the long-term rental definition. One thing I would note, based on all the conversations you've had, is this could be drafted differently. If your primary concern is that we're defining long-term rental at all, if you think that that is the major concern, that could be changed. All of the content that's in long-term rental definition could be moved to non-homestead, non-residential and achieve the same purposes, but would not, if you're concerned about there being a definition of long-term rental that could confuse people for some reason, if you, like, that can be fixed. There could be drafting solutions to some of the things I've heard. And I just want to flag that
Okay.
in case you want to explore that.
Drafting solutions that would have the same impact.
To not change anything of substance, but to change the way that things are structured or the way that words are used. Just like if there's, I've heard that dwelling unit, there's concern over using the word dwelling unit here. We actually, that was at first dwelling and there was a discussion in Ways and Means. And then I consulted the tax department and we thought, well, the concern with Ways and Means is the word dwelling is used for homestead. Except there's one significant difference between how the classifications use it and the homestead uses it. And that difference is that, is the one we were just talking about, the fit for habitation year round. You can declare a building as your homestead and it does not have to be fit for the habitation year round. So out of concern that there might be some confusion that the law was being changed for that, we decided to change for classifications to start using the term dwelling unit to try to avoid that confusion. So that's just an example of how that came about in order to avoid confusion for homesteads. If you think dwelling unit,
No, I think
Causes
dwelling
confusion.
unit is important, actually. I think it's an important clarification in here.
a different word could be used, though, is all I'm saying, is if you're concerned about words being confusing, we can use different words.
Okay,
Did I also hear you say, Kirby, that we could not define long-term rental and just take these definitions and non-homestead rental to reduce confusion about the legal term, long-term rental?
Yes, you can achieve the same thing without that definition. That was another drafting decision that was made going back way before the session when Tax put out their report, and I was drafting this in the first place. I had conversations with Tax about what would be a good way to structure this. But we decided that calling out long-term rentals separately was helpful because having the non-homestead, non-residential definition be very simple. It's written as it's a bucket that things just fall into when they're not other than. And we thought that that was the simplest way. But if you're saying that you're concerned about long-term rental being its own definition, one thing that we had considered in the first place was taking long-term rental and putting it as part of the definition of non-homestead, non-residential. Just depends on how from where I'm sitting, I don't see a problem with that being a definition that exists for purposes of tax classifications. But if it does make any of you nervous, I'm just saying we can fix things like that. But getting into the definition of long-term rental, as we've been over a few times today, the three parts are dwelling unit for which rent is paid for the right of occupancy for periods of at least 30 days. Second, a dwelling unit with combined rental periods in the current calendar year that total at least 6 calendar months, which need not be set consecutive. And last of all, there's a bona fide landlord-tenant relationship between the parties. And as we've discussed before, that's not something that has to be proven. None of this has to be proven on the front end. It's what you claim on your dwelling use attestation. To say that this is an apartment, don't apply the highest rate to me. And here's the square footage of the building. Here's how much of it's used for long-term rentals. And I'm attesting that all these long-term rentals meet the requirements.
there are some rentals that may not meet the requirements for habitable. Do dwelling.
We're not expecting anything.
No.
And so in that case, it's not put down as a dwelling unit. It's seasonal. It's not put down as a dwelling unit. It's not on the grand list as a dwelling unit.
Right.
So no dwelling use attestation needs to be filed. It's just a matter, it's in a homestead, and if there's no homestead declaration filed, the department would then know, well, this must be
No.
non-homestead, non-residential.
So now the question is, it used to be just non-homestead, non-residential. The question is it non-homestead, non-residential,
Mhm.
long-term or short-term? Right, because we've divided those out. And if it's so we don't have a problem with non-homestead home if it's a dwelling unit and it's not rented and I own it, but it is not my primary residence, so I'm not in it. What? It's 183 days.
It's non-homestead resident.
And it is non-homestead,
The
it's a
question-
second home and gets that tax.
The question, Scott, was, the initial question could be different things, but I'm gonna start with homestead or not. The first question, if homestead, then we know what to do.
It's good.
Okay, not homestead. Next question, does it have dwelling units? If it has dwelling units, we look at whether it's non-homestead residential. If it doesn't have dwelling units, it's automatically non-homestead, non-residential. So then if it does have dwelling units, then you look at all the things that are not dwelling units, mobile home, oh, it's not non-homestead residential then.
Wait.
This is, the mobile home is one of them. We also talked last time and you asked me to prepare language for, is it licensed as a lodging establishment? That's one that you asked me to add. So that would be another word. Oh, well, so far we've gotten to the point where this is a dwelling unit, but it's licensed as a lodging establishment, which then kicks it in, said non-residential.
Okay.
And so if you exhaust all of those and you still have a dwelling unit that's not excluded in any way from non-homestead residential, then you know, okay, this is non-homestead residential. It's a second home, it's short-term rental, or it's just a vacant property. It's not being used for anything.
Okay.
I just have a clarification question from earlier. You had mentioned offer available for rent for 6 months. Is that, so I'm thinking of, you have a home, say you're in Montpelier and you want to rent it out to the legislators, but it's a really big home, it's $5,000 a month. No one rents it, but you offered it for 6 months. Does that count as a long-term rental, or do you actually need rent paid?
Rent is paid.
So if you're unsuccessful about renting your property, you could be taxed out of the second home.
Well, that would be if you have 5,000 a month, you wouldn't have a problem. If you,
Well, if you think about a single family home, 4 to 5 grand a month is not out
no,
of the ordinance.
so, I mean, if it's available and and again, this, you're gonna declare this. It will be up to the tax department, your local lister, to challenge you. You can say, it's out there. I've got an ad in the paper, but no one's rented it. I have no income from it. But, but you intend to rent it. And a lot of this is
I think
Sounds like it won't.
making it available for rent.
it won't under this language.
You actually
And
have to
I would point out that if you change that,
Yeah.
then it would mean that anyone with a second home could just
Say it's open.
put their home on the market for $1 million a month, and then they're like, it's long-term rental.
Reasonable question.
Yeah,
So,
Because that's just a situation that I think of, like a regular old, it'd be a nice home, don't get me wrong, but 4 to 5 grand isn't out of the ordinary for a single family home.
we actually had a commercial place that did rented for some commercial operations that are in more than one state. Having a loss on your books, there can be value to.
But it wouldn't.
But this shouldn't. trigger-
no, it only qualifies for the time in which in which rent is actually being paid. I think part of the assumption here is that there is a rental market that has such high demand that finding a tenant has not been a concern.
Is mobile home in here because it may be my homestead, but I don't own the parcel on which it is?
Not really. It's
Because
there,
my
it's-
homestead
it's
is
there-
my homestead.
As if it's your homestead, it's fine. This is just to say that if you have a homestead and then you also own a mobile home, that mobile home will be treated as a second home. I think this, I'm going out on a limb, but I think it was seen previously as being akin to seasonal. And that's why.
When you say mobile home,
Mhm.
are we talking today's camper trailers that you drive your home with you? Or are we talking the manufactured double wide? Because I don't know what 10 BSA 621.
Yeah, I'm ready to. Mobile home means a structure or type of manufactured home, including the plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical systems contained in the structure that is built on a permanent, I don't know how to say this word, chassis,
There,
designed to be used as a dwelling with or without a permanent foundation when connected to the required utilities, transportable in one or more sections, and at least 8 feet wide, 40 feet long, or was erected. Yeah,
okay,
there's some of it.
so that is what we used to call trailers. Okay,
Yes, and the definition you have for classifications not including other types of manufactured homes, because there are things that you could order and have delivered, but they're more like a
and they're
traditional.
putting a foundation and they don't come with
Yeah.
wheels and you don't have to have them tied down.
Yes.
They're cemented, yeah. Okay,
And
so-
there was discussion of ways and means about those homes sometimes are very nice and they do not
Yeah.
really automatically say they have never.
So mobile home here then means a mobile home, one that is actually on wheels.
Mhm.
That can be moved around. It is not permanently,
That has a chassis.
it has a chassis.
Mhm.
Okay,
So
one can drive it.
technically, you can put a mobile home on a basement foundation. The chassis is
Now,
still
that's a
there.
manufactured,
No, you
a
can,
mobile, well,
well,
then it's meant,
you
Yeah,
can,
you can put it on the spot.
Yes,
Yeah.
you could do that and it would still not be a second home.
Right.
Yes.
okay. We do charge property tax. Cause it came up in this committee, we lost the floor battle. There are certain parks. You can see one from the interstate north of Burlington. Where people come spend the summer in their mobile camper homes.
Mhm.
And then they go back. To Burlington or to Florida or wherever else, and they leave that mobile home. On the campsite. It's stored there. And it is assessed. I believe it's property, but there
like
was.
the resorts. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a real property tax bill. Yeah.
It's, yeah, I mean, well, this was a complaint. They didn't think they should. They couldn't live in it because the guy shut the water off. Didn't plow it, but it was there, but they were charged. Yeah, a tax on that. So just,
Yeah, you have a tax bill, then you have like a resort fee.
just be aware of that one. All right. So
So
let's keep going.
I can walk through mixed use parcels, and then,
Okay, so
and then I could
we-
transition to your changes after that, okay?
when we get mixed use part. Remember we went through, you're charged. If you live in it, it's homestead and the ground is, if you live in it and you have a commercial unit. And then you have rentals and then you have short-term rentals. There's a formula, it all gets divided up.
Mhm.
Okay,
It's proportional to the floor space.
right.
How the
And
mixed
the
use.
land is, unless it's all rented,
Mhm.
at which point all of it is non-homestead.
And, if part of it is a homestead, that's not being changed.
Right,
This is the provision about if a portion of floor space is used for more than one purpose, the use for which the floor space is most often used shall be considered the primary use, and the floor space shall be dedicated to that use for purposes of tax classification, except for as what's provided under, the current law for homesteads.
so if I have an apartment that I rent out in Island Pond and I rented most of the building all year, but there's one apartment that I rent out to snowmobilers on the snowmobile weekends, if we ever get enough snow. Would that building, it would be counted as non-homestead, non-residential rather than second home if the primary use is as full-time rental. And I might occasionally rent out a vacant apartment.
Well, it has a long-term tenant for more than half the year.
It has lots of long-term tenants for more than half a year.
So
I
it's
just have one that I rent out a
a short
couple
term.
weekends a year, yeah.
So it would be based on the floor space. So the floor space of the unit that's used as a short-term rental
Yeah,
would be, the proportion of floor space compared to the rest of the building. And then a portion of the land that has the same proportion as the floor space. That would get the higher rate, and then the rest of it would get non-homestead, non-residential rate.
and if there's a commercial and a homestead in there, this could be a lot of work for. If there's, okay,
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
yes,
They
they
are
are.
all, day, all night.
I
Okay.
really thought we were more simplified.
We're gonna figure out all the.
We're gonna go the other way.
They'll be in stock. All right. So let's keep going. Then I'm gonna give us a break. Or maybe
It's a great idea.
give us like a 10-minute break around 3 o'clock if we can get through this. And so Kirby, let's keep going.
So those are all the pertinent definitions. I mean, we could be here all night. Or I could transition to the things you asked for changes, and I'll show you what those are. To get everyone,
Okay, but the things we asked for changes aren't in this section, right?
no, I have a separate document where I have.
Okay, let's go through Senator Hinsdale's amendment request.
Okay, you wanted the one that's based off of the transfer tax,
Um,
the landlord certificate and the longer definition of bona fide.
I'm worried. I would start with that because I saw your new one and I don't want to confuse everybody before break. We could look at both because there are lots of different ways to achieve this
I
outcome.
think, Senator, you need to decide what you want to propose to us.
Yes,
Two different amendments. Would it help if we took a break now and you could
yes, ma'am.
decide
Thank
what you
Madam
would like to
Chair.
propose to us and then
Yeah,